getting into the last of the reviews here. Man, this has been a long stream. We've done a lot here. But if you didn't catch out the other reviews, again, we have them all available. You can see us review every other color for all the cards in Wilds of Eldraine. Remember to like this video if you like reviews, so I know that you enjoy them, and we will do more of them in the future for other sets, because we didn't do them for the last couple sets, I don't think. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Also, be sure to follow me and subscribe so you could be here on the live stream and, you know, ask live questions and stuff about cards. All right, so starting in on this, we have Hilda of the Icy Crown, 2 colorless, white, green, 3/4, legendary creature, human warlock. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you can pay 1. Whenever you do, choose 1. Create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Scry 2, then draw a card. This thing is wild, first off. But if you have a consistent way to tap your opponent's stuff, and you can just like tap your dude, I'm going to pay 1 and make a 4/4, that's something. You know, like, this is kind of wild. Now, we don't have an Icy Manipulator in Standard where you can pay 1, tap it, tap a thing. If you did, it'd basically pay every turn, pay 2, make a 4/4. Be stellar, honestly. But we do have cards. Actually, it says whenever you tap an untapped creature, your opponent. So this isn't even like 1 or more creatures and once per turn. This is for every one of them. So if you have a creature that can tap down a thing, if you have one of those abilities like the, it's not illegal right now in Standard, but like those cards where like you get this thing or your opponent can tap a creature or whatever, that sort of thing, like that could be an issue. You know what's funny? The way this is worded, I just realized this says whenever you tap and an untapped creature and opponent. So I guess they had to word it that way because otherwise, whenever they attack, you'd get to make a bunch of 4/4. So that wouldn't work. So yeah, this card, it's a 3/4. So it's not like the smallest thing. It's not going to crush, right? It's not like gangbusters. But if you can find a way to tap your opponent's stuff, this could be pretty. This probably fits as a commander type card because it probably combos with a bunch of silly things. You know, that's probably it. You know, Tamiyo, yeah, that's a good suggestion. I mean, tap a creature every turn, make a 4/4. Because by the time you made your third one, your opponent's not punching through at that point, right? Without getting rid of all your creatures. I mean, that's real. The oily manipulator thing, yeah, that's true. That's the thing that lets you tap something. So yeah, there's some ways. There's some ways. If you can make it happen, this card might be pretty good. And it's not like the other abilities are bad either, right? Put a +1/+1 on everything or scry. And not only that, it's scry and draw. So yeah, lots of upside with this card. What other things do we got here? We have Will, Scion of Peace. He's one of the twins, right? From that were here, the royal twins. Colorless, white, blue for a 2/4. Legendary creature, human wizard with vigilance. Tap spells you cast this turn that are white or blue cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. This is cool. I don't know, like, this almost feels like I want to play it with cards that have lifelink or something like that. But you do have a lot of food in this set, right? So you could crack some food, tap this, and now all your spells, I'm assuming because you're playing a white-blue deck, cost at least 3 less. That's pretty strong. This is pretty good. Or again, you could attack, let your opponent block a couple things, and you're like, okay, I'm going to replace them with this big monster that I had to pay less for. Because this isn't even like sorceries or anything. This is just your white and blue spells. Yeah, white or blue cost X. Yeah, this might be really good, y'all. I mean, I'm not even joking. This might be really, really excellent. I don't know. Because here's the other problem, right? This is a real issue with this deck or with this card. Is that what are you willing to risk that needs that cost reduction? Right? Like, how many things that cost, let's say, 2 white or a white blue and like 3 colorless mana are you willing to play so this ability matters? Right? Because you don't want a deck full of those, but you also need like at least 6 or else this doesn't really matter, right? Otherwise, you're just like, you're making a couple of things cost like 1 mana less or something. That's okay, I guess. Not the most exciting thing, but it's something. And this is a 2/4, so you can block a lot of things with this. And it does have vigilance, which is kind of nice. So you can attack and then use the ability if you wanted to. it's one of those ones, like, part of me wants to be like, this could be really good, but in Standard, is it though? Now, again, in Commander, where I'm playing a bunch of stuff that costs 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, then yeah, sure, having Will is actually pretty sweet. Because I'm like, oh, I gained like 6 life this turn. Great, now I'm going to cast these 3 big monsters that only cost me like 6 mana total, right? That's actually pretty cool. But as it is, I'm not like, not the biggest thing. Cool card though, but I don't think it's that he would be broken if he had lifelink. Maybe, because again, I think the issue isn't even what you're gaining life with. I think there's a lot of ways to gain life. I think we have a lot of creatures with lifelink where it's going to be a bunch of food. I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue here is the deck building, right? What are you willing to risk for bad draws or slow draws to make this card viable? I think that's the real thing. Because, like, I guess there's some worlds where you're just going to tap it and be able to play, like, 2 creatures this turn instead of 1, and that's going to be good enough. But, it's all right. It's all right. Let's go. We have several more here. So we have Likeness Looter. Colorless and a black for a fairy shapeshifter, 1/1 flying. You can tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. You can pay X, and it becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability. Activate only as a sorcery. This is a really cool card. So you get a 1/1 with flying for 2 mana. And then you can fuel itself by drawing and discarding. Put whatever in the graveyard. And then pay, 4 to turn it into whatever 4 mana creature is in your graveyard. And it's permanent. So it's not even like it's till end of turn or anything quirky like that. It just becomes that thing until you change it again, I guess. It is a mana investment and it is a fragile creature. So I don't know if it's great, but I think it's a cool card. I don't know how good it'll be in Standard. It probably fits in some, very mid-rangey whatever deck where you've already made them expend some resources and kill some things. And they're like, okay, cool. Now I'm going to turn this into a 4/5 flying Shieldred or something. Like, that's probably doable. But yeah, it's a cool card. Also kind of has creepy artwork. I'm sort of into it. This says, does it lose the tap ability when it copies? Likeness Looter becomes a copy of target creature in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability. Yes, it would lose the draw and discard, because the ability says it specifically becomes one of those, but it keeps the ability to shapeshift and flying. So yeah, that's an important thing to note. This thing, also with some cool looking art. The fairy's got some sweet art in this set. Talion, the Kindly Lord. 2 colorless, blue and a black for a 3/4 fairy noble legendary flying. When it enters the battlefield, choose a number between 1 and 10. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the chosen number, the player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Wow, okay, so you have to choose 6. And then if your opponent plays anything that's a 3/3 or a 2/4 or a 4/2 or a 1/5 or an 0/6, you get to draw a card and they lose 2 life. This is an interesting card. And the thing is, it's particularly good against, say, mono white aggro, where the majority of the creatures are going to be 2/2s and 2/1s, right? So you can just call 4 and know that that's the 2 different veterans in the deck. It's Brutal Cathar. It's possibly the knight that you can discard to give it indestructible or whatever, right? There's a bunch of things in the deck that are just 2/2s. Or some combination of 3/1s, right? Because there's also the adversary, stuff like that. So in those instances, it's good. I think when you're playing against mono green, maybe it becomes tougher because they have a 2/1, they've got a 2/2, they've got a 4/5, they have a 6/6, right? So it's probably bad in those scenarios. So this feels like it's very metagame dependent, right? Because you could very well play this as a 3/4. It's a 3/4 flyer. Maybe get a card and the opponent loses 2 life. Still not bad if you look at it on rate. You paid 4 mana for a 3/4 flyer, got a card, your opponent lost 2 life. That's probably still reasonable. So it's not the worst thing. But yeah, I don't know. This card's odd. I kind of dig it, but still a little bit odd. Or maybe it's even, depending on what number you choose. Yeah, it's a bad joke. All right, Rowan, Scion of War, colorless, black, red, legendary creature, human wizard, 4/2, has menace. It's kind of weird. I didn't think Rowan would be black. Wasn't the last Rowan we saw these guys red and blue? And then now we just added white to Will and black to Rowan. Interesting. It's a 4/2 with Menace. You can tap this and spells you cast this turn that are black or red cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn. I mean, it's a 4/2 with Menace for 3, so it's at least a reasonable card on its own. This ability kind of has the same issue a little bit that Will had, right? Where you have to decide what is it worth to play with that much colorless mana to justify using this ability. Possible, though, that... Oh, wait, this doesn't work that way. I was going to say you could use this with Ashiok, so instead of losing life, you exile cards. But then this specifically says where you lost life, so that wouldn't even work. Yeah, this is probably way better than I think, right? I feel like there's got to be some cards where, like, you cast this, you lose X amount of life because it has this downside or whatever, and then you tap Rowan, and now your next couple of cards are, like, -3, and then you get these things. But it does say just amount of life you lost, so it's not like you could deal damage to yourself for various things, and that still qualifies. So that makes a difference, too. Yeah, I think this is playable. I just think, again, it's going to be deck construction on how much this matters. Yeah, exactly. Pain lands are an exact way you can lose life. So I think it's fine. It's just, like, it's a pseudo ramp card that you don't necessarily have to work for. Because it's very possible that, like, you just deal, like, let's say you play this on 3 and it lives, which is difficult because it's only 2 toughness. But let's say it lives. And then you next turn tap a Sulphur Springs and some other pain land. So now all your stuff costs 2 less. Then you could tap Rowan, play a Shieldred and something on turn 4. That's actually pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, that's more than reasonable. That's a lot for somebody to deal with. So yeah, this probably has room. I think it takes some tinkering, but it's probably got a home. We have Agatha of the Vile Cauldron. Because it was Agatha all along. Like, I guess if you know, you know. Red-green, 1/1, human warlock. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less, where X is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron's power. This effect can't reduce the mana and the cost to less than 1 mana. You can pay 4 and red and green. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 on trample and haste until end of turn. I do not know what to do with this card. This is it's a 2 mana 1/1, which is already not great for what most Gruul decks want to be doing. But I'm thinking, like, if I can pump it, what activated abilities am I playing right now? Because it has to be activated abilities of creatures, not even just regular activated abilities. Like, what do we want to activate with this right now? Like, maybe, oh, you know what? Maybe like Vorinclex and Pulokranos, like that type of stuff maybe could become a lot easier to flip with this. I mean, that's an option. I don't know if we have that many ways to put counters on this though, but that's something. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess if we get this card big enough, her own ability, you'd be able to activate like twice and give everything +2/+2 and trample. That's kind of cool. See, this is one of those cards that, like, it's a mythic, so I sit and stare at it and go, what do I not know? Why is this a mythic and it doesn't feel like a mythic? Right? Is this something that just goes ham in Commander? Right? Where it just makes everything cheaper? Which, to be fair, in Commander, this could be the Stone Cold Nuts. Like, I could see a situation where you're like, okay, I put counters, now I get to cast or use all these abilities to go off 3 or 4 times. Like, that could be awesome. Gruul decks don't use that many activated abilities on creatures, maybe Miglos. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, Pulokranos, Vorinclex, those have some good abilities, but they are kind of pricey. This could reduce it and make it reasonable. But the other issue that a lot of decks have right now is, like, this still would have to dodge all the removal, the cut downs and all that to even be viable. So, like, do you want to play one more thing that's susceptible to literally every removal spell, including, like, in the festivities and, you know, miscellaneous things, than just playing a better creature? I think that's the problem. So this one, for now, I'm probably just writing off, but I will maybe build a deck with it at some point during the season, just because it's a cool ability to try to make work. What else do we got here? This one looks neat. Oh, if Scryfall wants to cooperate. Scryfall's stuck for a second, so we may not get to see cards. We'll just have to wait. Let me see if I could try it again. Nope, we'll just have to wait a second. Scryfall decided to stick on me. There we go. popped up. We have Yenna, Redtooth, Regent. 2 colorless, green, white. Also, welcome everybody to the stream. Just showed up 50 of y'all in here now. Thank you so much. We do have all these reviews toward the end of the set, but the others will be videos, or you can go back and rewatch the stream if you want to see the other stuff. 4 mana, 4/4, Elf Noble. Again, another elf, and it's a 4/4. 2 colorless, tap it, choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name as another permanent you control. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's except it isn't legendary. If the chosen token is an aura, untap Yenna, then scry 2, activate only as a sorcery. Interesting. So it says choose target enchantment. I think this got misworded. Maybe, okay, so choose target enchantment you don't control it, or you control that doesn't have the same name as something else, right? And then, oh, you create a token that's a copy of it. And then, okay, got it. Okay, so this is, I don't know if it, like, I guess if you have a deck that just cares about enchantments, because there are going to be a lot of things that care about enchantments in this set, you can play this, but it doesn't feel super great. However, it's probably also not that hard to be able to copy something and then untap this, so it's almost like a free activation where you get to scry also. So this is okay. Yeah, I thought about that too. Get a second Calyx. That is actually viable, because it says choose target enchantment, and you can go ahead and make a copy, and the copy's not legendary. So, I mean, that's totally viable. I mean, like, that's a real thing you can do. But again, I'm also going to ask, like, this is where we're going to be at, right? Because we have all these choices in Standard now. Do the Selesnya enchantment decks want this card? And I don't know that answer. They might very well want it, right? It's a big body. It can let them copy things. It might be worth it. What are we replacing, right? Those decks benefit as that they get to play like the little green 1/1. They're playing the Kami of whatever. They're playing Jukai Naturalist, Calyx, right? At least 8 copies of some enchantment removal, usually like ossification and something, right? There's not a lot of room. So, like, are they cutting one of their search cards? Are they cutting a Hallowed Haunting to play this? I don't know what the answer is, right? But it is a big body, so they could justify playing it. I just don't know if those decks particularly need something like this. It is an elf, but do the elf decks want this? Maybe, because it's a big 4/4 body, but the ability would be largely irrelevant, I imagine. So I don't really know. I don't know what to do with this. It's a neat card, and I think a lot of people will want this. And anybody that plays commander decks that are white-based that play a bunch of enchantments, well, most of those decks are white-green anyway, because a lot of those cards, all the enchantresses and everything else fall into that category. So yeah, this is probably super good for those builds. And that's probably one of the things going to keep this card's value moving up. So you can duplicate Machiko, and then when it flips, you have duplicate of the first clone. Yes, that sounds correct. Keep in mind the transformation mechanism. Yeah, you can't flip the backside. But I mean, if you just wanted the extra +1/+1s, like, you can get that. Once a card's exiled, it's exiled if it's not an actual card. Even then, just getting the extra +1/+1s could be good enough, though. Right? Like that, especially with a trampling creature, could just end the game. I don't know. This is an interesting card, because it really is going to come down to where the meta shifts and what those decks that are focused on this feel they need, right? More than anything else. And it is a 4/4 body. I mean, you got to respect that. Ariete, or Ariete? I don't know. Maybe he's French. Of the Charmed Apple. Colorless, white, black, 2/4. Legendary creature, human warlock. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X, where X is the number of auras you control. Ooh, okay. This card's kind of mean, because each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or so if you're just putting rolls on your opponent's stuff, they can never attack you with this card out. And then you're just gaining life on top of it. This card's kind of nice. This card's kind of, I dig it. I mean, it's not like it's unkillable or anything, right? It's only a 2/4. It doesn't have any protective abilities of any kind. But it can buy you a decent amount of time in the right scenarios. I'm kind of into this. This is interesting. It's fun. I expect a few people will try to play it. Again, it's a human. It's a warlock. There's a lot of those in this set, so maybe there's a sub-theme there you can build around. But just the ability itself is not that hard to use, which is pretty cool. What do we got left here? We have Fawn's Bane Troll. 2 colorless, black-green for 4/4. When Fawn's Bane Troll enters the battlefield, create a monster roll token attached to it. Creature gets +1/+1 and has trample. It has you can pay 1 and sacrifice an aura attached to this card. It fights target creature you don't control. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. You activate only as a sorcery. This is just a really interesting card, right? Because you can pay 4 and have effectively a 5/5 trampler. Or you can have a 4/4 and make something else a +1/+1 with trample. Or you can put an aura on this and then let this fight something as a 4/4. And then you exile a thing, which is also very good. It does only let you fight as a sorcery, which is a pain in the rear, but not terrible. This is a card I could see, like, again, if we were rotating standard, I think I could find more justification for this card. But right now, I think there's just going to be so many quality cards. Does this push out anything else? Unless you have a deck that cares about having a lot of rolls, right? Because then you can just keep removing the roll off of this and just keep fighting stuff for 1 mana, which is actually more than exciting, right? If you get to do that. Because you're like, all right, it comes in with 1, I remove it, fight a thing for 4. And then I put another thing on it, and then I fight a thing for 4, right? And just keep doing that. Keep your opponent off stuff is pretty big. So if you do have a roll-based deck, this thing could be annoying and you have to kill it almost on sight. But outside of that, it's probably lesser than some other cards you could be playing at 4 mana in green and black. It says monster rolls are available at sushi places. That is true. They're on most menus. How many cards have the token you can put on an opponent's creature? There's several, because one of the rolls is actually turn a creature into a 1/1 creature. So that is a real thing you can do. There's a lot. What else do we have here? Mother Goose. X blue green. It's a bird hydra 2/2. Flying. When it enters the battlefield with X counters on it, so no surprise there. When Mother Goose enters the battlefield, create half X food rounded up. And then when it attacks, you can sacrifice a food if you do draw a card. This is kind of neat. So, right, let's say we spend 6, right? So it's a 4/4, or it gets +4/+4, and it starts as a 2/2. So you're going to get a 6/6 for 6, and then you get 2 food tokens. And then when you attack, you can sacrifice food and draw a card. Or, obviously, you can just use them as food. This is, I don't know what to do with this card. It's kind of neat, though, right? I'm kind of into it. Especially, we've talked earlier on a couple of these other review doing the colors, is that if we have stuff that already is ramping up, or things already playing a bunch of treasure, like, this is the type of card you can play and be like, okay, I'm at least going to get some value out of this, right? I'm going to play it, even if I spend, like, who knows, 8, 10 mana, whatever. You get this big body, and you get a pile of food. So you could either just gain life, or you can also just start trying to draw cards. This is actually a really neat card. I don't think it's great, but it's good enough that it's probably going to show up in some different lists. Baluna Grand Squall. It's a green, red, blue for a 4/4. So that's great on rate. Giant Noble. It has trample. Permanent. I don't think we've seen that many giants so far during these reviews. Permanent spells you cast that have an adventure cost 1 less to cast. And then Seek Thrills is 2 colorless, green, blue, red, instant, mill 7 cards, then put all the cards that have adventures from among them into your hand. This is just a solid card if you're building an adventure-themed deck, right? We've seen several things in blue, red, and green that have really good adventures. Yeah, not much really to say about this card. I mean, it's a quality 3 mana 4/4. We have the mana in the format to be able to play this on time. Later ones we can use to just mill stuff and then put a bunch in our hand, and this makes all those things cheap. Yeah, this is just a decent card. I think it can work for a lot of different things. It probably will end up being a popular commander for a lot of people. I will say this, though. The art feels a little like, a little muted compared to everything else, considering this is a big, crazy adventure giant. But that's probably the only real downside. And then we're into the artifacts. Agatha's Soul Cauldron. 2 colorless, legendary artifact. You can spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter on them have all activated abilities of all cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. You can exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creatures you control. So this gets to remove creatures from graveyards, or, well, cards from graveyards, but if you remove a creature, you then put a +1/+1 on something you control, and then your creatures that happen to have +1/+1s on them will have every ability of the creature that you exiled. Or of all the creatures that you've exiled, actually. So that's actually pretty solid. For only 2 mana, this is not bad at all. The thing I like about this is that it also is just extra bonus value in any deck that already cares about +1/+1 counters, right? Because it's just 2 colorless, it's easy to play. You want to keep your opponent from reanimating things, using flashbacks, stuff like that. Pretty easy. And then you just get possibly bonus abilities. Even if you don't exile a bunch, it's like if your opponent has one good thing that like has some activated ability, you're great. All my creatures have this anytime I need them to. And you can use any color mana. So that's pretty cool. This is a neat card. I don't know where it excels, but again, if you have a deck that already cares about +1/+1s and you want upside to be able to remove cards from graveyards or anything like that, this checks that box too and just gives you some cool upside ability. So yeah, I'm kind of into this card. Where are we at here after this? Oh, this looks epic. Hilda's Crown of Winter. 3 colorless. You can pay 1 and tap it. Oh, well, this goes with the Hilda thing we just saw. You can pay 1 and tap target creature. This ability costs 1 less to activate during your turn. So you can literally just tap it and pay nothing. Pay 3, sacrifice the crown, draw a card for each tapped creature your opponent controls. This card is really good. It's legendary, so, you know, there's that. But obviously, if your opponent attacked with 3 or 4 things, you're like, okay, I can sacrifice it and then just draw 3 cards and then play my new one and then just tap it. Like, this is cool. This, along with Hilda, becomes quite scary. Because now it's just tap this, pay 1 mana, make a 4/4. Or scry, or whatever, right? Like, really, really good. Really good. And I like the fact that it's Hilda, and then the card that does the thing is Hilda's Crown. I like that a lot. And Hilda's Crown could also just be played in other formats, right? If you just want to play this in Commander as a way to just draw cards, right? There's almost always somebody who's going to try to attack with a bunch of, like, I don't know, with 12 1/1 goblins or something. And you're like, sweet, I'm going to go ahead and draw 12 cards because you draw a card for each tap creature, right? This card realistically might be underpriced right now. Also good for tapping the big threat that might be killing you, right? If they have some unblockable thing or some flyer you can't deal with, you can just keep that at bay for a while too. That's another option. So yeah, this is really, really neat. What's even funnier, it says for each tap creature your opponents control. So if you wait a full turn cycle, and let's say player 1 has attacked somebody with like 2 or 3 things, and then player 3 has attacked with a couple of things, and then player 4 wants to retaliate against one of them, they attack with a couple of things, and great, you blow up your Hilda's Crown during their instep, and you draw like 9 cards, right? So yeah, this card's pretty sweet. I'm surprised this has not come across my Twitter feed before right now. I genuinely did not know this was a card. Like I said, I hadn't been looking at much of the set, but this feels really cool. I like this a lot. If you happen to play the Witch Queen with the enchantment duplicator, then you can attach more curse rolls, and there are also some blue auras. Oh yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff you're going to be able to do. Like, it's just how much time do you have, I think would be the question, right? Just because you have these things do take time to set up is the issue. Sir Ginger, the Meal Ender. That is a funny title. 2 colorless for a 3/1 legendary artifact food night creature. It has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. I see what you did here, because in the last set, it was all the pre-story about Garrick accidentally eating a gingerbread person or whatever. So if they have a planeswalker, you get all these bonuses. That's cute. Whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1. Pay 2 colorless, tap it, sacrifice Sir Ginger, you gain life equal to its power. So he's basically a food till you start putting other counters on it. Whenever another artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1. Oh, this isn't even once per turn. So again, we come back to the whole idea of like, we have things generating food, generating treasure. You could just sack like 4 treasure. And then now this is a 7/5. And you have an option of sacrificing to gain 7 life if things go badly. And it could possibly also have Trample Hexproof Haste. Right? This card's actually low-key kind of good. Seriously. And it can fit into a bunch of random decks, right? It is just an aggressive creature, being a 2-1 or a 3-1 for 2 that you can also get some life out of later, which is not bad. I kind of like this. This is a quirky card, but it has weird bits of upside because it just be splashed into a bunch of different decks. I'm kind of into it. We have another weird card here, it looks like. The Iron Crag. The two, you know what? Seeing that is like the aggro crag, for those of you that are old enough to know what that is. 2 colorless, legendary artifact. It taps for a colorless, which is rare. We don't get 2 mana artifacts that tap for mana in standard these days. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can have this become a legendary equipment artifact named Everflame Hero's Legacy. If you do, it gains equip 3, and equip creature gets +3/+3, and it loses all other abilities. So this becomes an equipment that's pay 3, equip creature gets +3/+3. Which then becomes interesting because you could play a second one then, and since they're become different cards, so that's pretty cool. They're both legendary, right? Yeah, even if it changes, it becomes legendary. So you can't ever have more than 2. It does tap to, the new one anyway, would be able to tap to activate the old one, which is kind of nice. This is interesting. I don't think it's great, but if you're already just playing a deck that's full of legends, and there's a few different variants of that, this is probably fine, right? You can just give something +3/+3, and it's a constant nuisance to your opponent. So yeah, this is cool. I'm not like in love with this, but I do like it. And the fact that it just gives you mana on the cheap can also be used by several different decks. So don't hate it. But looks like that's the last of the artifacts. Let's do the lands here as we wrap this up. So Relentless Fortress comes in the battlefield tapped. Taps for a white or a black. You can pay 2 colorless, black-green, and it becomes a 1/4 white-black nightmare creature until end of turn. It's still a land. When it attacks, defending player loses 2 life. You gain 2 life. F this card. But that being said, the card's actually pretty good. It's going to make some games very drawn out and boring and miserable. The black-white control decks are going to love this card. That's kind of the story on it. Like, there's really not a lot else to say there. It's just a good card. Restless Spire also comes in play tap. Taps for red and blue. You can pay red and blue until end of turn. It becomes a 2/1 red-blue elemental. Creature with as long as it's your turn, this creature has first strike. It's still a land. Whenever it attacks, you scry 1. Yeah, this one's not as good, but still very solid. It is only a 2/1, but it does have first strike on your turn, so it's harder to block. And that matters in a world where fairies are going to exist. And getting to scry is pretty powerful too. I don't think it's as strong, but only costing 2 to activate leaves a lot more open with this card. I will say it is a 2/1 elemental that's not flying, so it can be blocked by a lot of things. And that makes it a lot less exciting. But yeah, probably still going to get played. I mean, at least a couple copies. Restless Cottage. Comes into play tap, taps for green or black. Pay 2 colorless, black, green. It becomes a 4/4 black and green horror creature until end of turn, still land. Whenever Restless Cottage attacks, create a food token and exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. This one's pretty solid, right? You make a 4/4, you still exile something from a graveyard. This is exactly the type of card I think some of the green aggro decks want. Whether that's splashing stuff to be able to play this, and say you're playing Gruul and you play enough lands that cross over so you can activate this, or you're just playing Golgari anyway. Having a land that always comes into play tap sort of sucks, but the upside it gives you to protect yourself against like sweepers and everything else, very powerful. And it's a 4/4, so that's a big deal. And if you have anything that reduces costs and everything else like we've seen in the set, that all makes a difference too. It's only opposing color man lands, no allied colors. Yep, that is true. That is true. Restless Bivouac. Comes into play tap, taps for red-white. Colorless red-white. Turns this into a 2/2 red and white ox creature until end of turn. It's still a land. Whenever it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Yeah, I don't mind this one too. It's cheap to activate, just 3 mana. This is nice. It can almost always be a 3/3 plus when it attacks if you want it to be, so that's pretty cool. And again, a good card for the red-white decks, the human Naya decks, stuff like that are just trying to dodge some of the sweeper action. Pretty good stuff. Don't hate. Again, if you also have a deck that cares about +1/+1 counters, right? It's good for that too. Like, good all around. All of these are actually pretty strong, to be honest. The blue-red one feels like the weakest. This comes into play tap for green or blue. This one's the most expensive one at 5, I believe. 3 colorless, green, blue. Until end of turn, it becomes a 5/5 green and blue plant creature with trample. It's still a land. Whenever it attacks, up to one other target creature has base power and toughness 3/3 until end of turn. So this one's kind of cool. It costs more, but you get a bigger creature and it tramples. And then you can also turn something else into a 3/3. The interesting thing is, it doesn't say other creature you control. So you could, if your opponent had a big blocker, you could turn it into a 3/3. Or you just turn some other 1/1 or 2/2 into a bigger creature so you can attack alongside this. So yeah, I don't hate it. I guess it's tough. I guess if I had to order them, the blue-red one is probably the worst of them, though it has the cheapest cost, so it probably could be played in more decks. This one's probably the next worst just because of cost. But the upside is actually really big, getting a 5/5 Trampler and a potential 3/3 alongside it. Daniel says, I play slow graveyard deck, but standard really does not need graveyard hate does needs graveyard hate due to the Atraxa Reanimator, Breach the Multiverse. Yeah, absolutely. You definitely need ways to remove stuff from graveyards. Or, some way just exile them as a whole, stop what they're doing, whatever, because it makes a big difference. And we did get a couple of cards in this set that do help with that. But yeah, that concludes the review of all of the cards. So thank you for hanging out. If you would like to support me, remember to like this video because it helps so much that y'all do that. Remember to subscribe if you haven't. So next time I'm doing impromptu streams, maybe I'm playing stuff, maybe I'm reviewing your decks. Like, you can be part of it and you'll get notified. And be sure to hit the bell to make sure you get the notifications. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel, please become a member of the YouTube channel. For as little as 99 cents, I do have cool stuff that goes just to members on here, which is nice. And you can get your decks reviewed and featured on the channel. Otherwise, check out my merchandise. I have some cool stuff. Thank you. Support my sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. If you want to buy Magic stuff or get Wilds of Eldraine stuff, go check them out. You can save 5% with code DRAGON.